This is a topic on resiliency, overcoming compassion fatigue, and burnout. This is something that doesn't just affect clinicians, but can affect family members as well. So this session is going to be led today by PPMD's President Pat Furlong and Kathy Kinnett, PPMD's Clinical Care Advisor. They're going to be joined by some great doctors from Nationwide Children's Hospital, Dr. Natalie Truba, Dr. Brandon Kozar. And then we have a wonderful panel of amazing parents that are a number of our Connect coordinators, as well as Dr. James Poysky, who is a child psychologist. So as a reminder, if you have any questions while this panel is going on, please submit your questions and comments to the box below, and we'll be able to get to those whenever we get to the Q&A session. So with that, I'm going to hand the discussion over to Kathy.
Thanks so much, Eric. We felt that this was a really important topic. We know that Duchenne is a complex and complicated diagnosis, and caring for people with Duchenne and living with Duchenne can take a toll on families, especially on caregivers. So giving people tools to overcome compassion fatigue and burnout and build resilience, we thought was just a really important discussion. Before we begin this discussion, I want to have everybody introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about why you are on the panel and what you bring to the discussion. James, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. I'm James Poysky. I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist, and I'm also a parent. I have a 17-year-old son who's got Duchenne, and so I experience it as a professional, but also as a family member as well. And so I've had a lot of interest in the impact that Duchenne can have on learning and behavior and emotional adjustment.
Thanks. Rachel?
I'm Rachel Poysky, James' wife, and I'm mom to Joel. And we live in Houston, Texas, and I'm also a pastor by trade. And I've been always interested in how families navigate grief and resilience as they move through this Duchenne journey. So those are some of the interests that I bring to this panel.
Thanks. Betty?
Hi, thank you. Betty Vertin. I live in Hastings, Nebraska. I'm on the panel as a parent. I have 6 children, 3 of whom are boys with Duchenne. Max is 14, Rowan 11, and Charlie 9 years old.
Thanks. Gretchen?
I am Gretchen Egner. I live in Mukwonago, Wisconsin, and I have 2 sons. Alex is 23, and my 21-year-old Nick has Duchenne. And I guess my overall mantra in life is to stay positive because you only get one, and so to make the most out of each one. And so I'll probably talk about that quite a bit tonight.
Good, thanks. Natalie?
I'm Natalie Truba. I'm a pediatric psychologist at Nationwide Children's Hospital. I see a lot of these boys and their families in clinic and in my office and during admissions and in research study clinics and all over the place. And so I do a lot with behavior management and emotion management. And I'm also just broadly very interested in dystrophin and what dystrophin does to the brain and learning in particular.
Thanks. Brandon?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Brandon Kozar. I'm a clinical psychologist and a director of the You Matter Staff Support Program at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And my work primarily involves supporting a lot of the medical staff around issues of compassion fatigue, burnout, and cultivating resiliency within the staff population.
Thanks. So we have a great panel. I just want to start by saying that I looked up resilience, and it says it's the ability to recover quickly from difficulties and to the ability to spring back into shape. So, Rachel, with all the difficulties that families living with Duchenne encounter, can you talk a little bit about how you foster resilience in your own life?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kathy. I live in Houston and we have hurricanes, and we can't avoid them. They come whether we want them to or not. But we do learn how to live with them and manage around them and protect ourselves. And I think that's a lot like the Duchenne journey. It is, how do you live in the storm and not just live and survive, but how do you thrive in it? And for me, I think that's been just the most important thing about the Duchenne journey is this: how do you thrive? And as Gretchen said, you only get one life. So how do you do it well? So for me, there's I just want to share kind of 5 things that I think helps me with resilience. The first one that I've been doing since basically the day Joel was diagnosed, it can be so overwhelming with doctor's appointments and therapists and what clinical trial and all those things. And so what I've done basically since day one is I pick one thing to with get overwhelmed with so many things. So I just put on my to-do list, call this one doctor, do this one physical therapy, that sort of thing. And that has really helped me to break it up into pieces and has just helped my sanity for years. The other thing I think that's been important for our family is to not let Duchenne define everything, that we try to have other interests and other goals and things like that. And I think you can let it consume your entire life. And I'm not sure that's good for you or for our boys or the siblings. So that I would say would be the second thing. And the third thing is just to have a support system. This is great. PPMD is great for us to have support system. And I think you need Duchenne parents as a support, and then you also need people outside of the Duchenne community to support you. Maybe it's through your faith community, maybe it's through some common interests and things like that. And another thing is self-care. You have to take care of yourself, and especially during this time of COVID, and we don't have the opportunity to go out and, do big things like spa days. That sounds great, but, the Duchenne budget doesn't often allow for spa days. But there are little things that we can do every day, and that's been good for me. James can tell you I love reality TV, and so that's one of my self-care. But just to find something little or to do that that makes you happy. You've got we say it all the time, it's a marathon. And then the last thing I would just say that's been helpful for me in resilience is to let things go, to not be perfect. We say in our house all the time, good enough. And that is important. We're not going to do everything, and I know we look back and just look back and say, okay, let's find the humor and the fun and be connected that way. So.
Thanks so much. Those are all really good and really important topics and really important things to keep in mind. Betty, with 3 sons with Duchenne, how do you find time for yourself?
Well, it's something I have to work at, plan has to be on the schedule. It's not something that I just happen to find myself with extra time. 6 children by itself is a lot. And then you add in the needs of 3 boys with Duchenne. And we have a hopping household here. So I schedule time. I make sure I start my morning off with a little time by myself. Right now, it's summer. It's nice here in Nebraska. So I like to walk out to the garden. I look at my flowers. I pick the vegetables. Sometimes it's just 10 or 15 minutes, but that alone time, that quiet time to start my day is definitely important. And then I like to run, walk, and do yoga. So I try once a day to get that incorporated. And sometimes it's a 10-minute yoga on the deck while the kids are banging on the window because they need something. But I take those 10 minutes and they know it's mom's time. But I think it's important to plan that time into your day and try to do the things that you enjoy.
Gretchen, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. When I was thinking when Rachel was talking of all those different elements, and I think the thing that's key for me is the not sweating the small stuff and not getting overwhelmed with everything, because everything takes a few extra steps. And like Betty, you got that times 3 with your boys. And so I think like today, Nick had his cardiac MRI appointment and my husband had to take him. And so I had to make sure that everything was set for that and getting him up in the morning. You've got like all those extra steps before you can do those things. But I made sure that I left for my run 15 minutes early so that I had that extra 15 minutes because Nick's home this week because he has that appointment. And I think just kind of, building that in. We have the extra time. We have this extra burden. But as Rachel mentioned, you get support from the Duchenne community. But if you have friends and support systems and other folks, they have their own set of needs as well. And so when you put in what your issues and problems that we have as Duchenne parents, there are other issues and problems that they have as well. And so spending time with them and letting them tell their story, so it's not always like, here's my struggle with my boy with Duchenne. I think that helps you put things into perspective. We've been dealt this, and so we have those 4 extra steps before we can get out the door to go to our appointment. We have to make sure before we go for our quick appointment that we have the extra urinal that we need to strap in and before we go in the van and we go somewhere. And of course, we all need to make sure that we have masks now, but we got to make sure we have masks now before we go with our boys anywhere. And so if we take it in stride, we have those extra steps, but everybody has issues and burdens. It's not like it's all just on us. And I know that seems easier said than done, but really the attitude that we put into it, if this is how we're going to do it and it's going to be fine, I think that, that not wears off, but that rubs off on our boys. And they see that, well, mom or dad, like, they got this under control. This is how we're doing it. This is how things are. We aren't so overwhelmed that we're not going to be able to get through this.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. And I think one of the reasons, or one of the ways that guys can feel like they've got things under control is if they feel like that they're a little bit more independent and that they can control their environment as well. So, James, can you talk a little bit about how you establish independence in your household and how you have managed to do some of that with Joel?
Yeah, and I mean it's an evolving process. I mean, we're always working on that, and I don't know if we've really kind of found any one thing that works. But I think you're always walking that line between, not catering to them too much. At least I don't know about other boys, but Joel certainly is always tempted to kind of ask for other people to do things that he could do himself, but then kind of play it off like he can't do it because he has Duchenne. And so we're always trying to find that balance of, being supportive, but also pushing him out of his comfort zone, but in a way that's manageable and in a way where we're not throwing him to the sharks, so to speak, or, kind of overloading him with too much stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, we try to focus on kind of just the daily tasks, the daily stuff that we have to get done, and kind of pushing him a little bit each day to try to take more of it on himself. And some days it feels like we're making good progress. Some days it feels like we've taken 10 steps back. But, I think we're always trying to take our best guess in any given situation. And that's kind of the best that we can do, as long as kind of as an overarching goal, we're trying to push for that and, kind of keeping that in consideration.
Thanks. I think to become independent, we all have to kind of get out of our comfort zone a little bit. But so, Brandon, how do you encourage parents to help their kids get out of their comfort zone and help parents push out of their comfort zone as well? Because that's important too, I think.
Yeah, it really is important. And, so when we look at this kind of concept of resiliency, right, and you kind of provided that definition of that kind of ability to kind of bounce back, if you will. The way that I've kind of often described it to parents, as well as, a lot of the medical providers that I kind of support through my work, is you almost think of it like this kind of emotional muscle, right, that needs to be strengthened. And so a lot of us, when we kind of think about, just strengthening, and certainly with Duchenne, muscular dystrophy, you understand this with the muscle fatigue that occurs with that. But just like many of us, when we're trying to strengthen a muscle, there needs to be strain associated with that. And then there needs to be some type of recovery that types of occurs. And in the same way, if we really kind of talk about kind of growth, and James, you mentioned it, and Gretchen, you mentioned it, Rachel, Betty, you all kind of talked about this, of how by pushing ourselves a little bit out of that comfort zone, we don't deny that in the moment that doesn't feel good, right? I mean, it's not fun. It's not that feeling in that moment is not satisfying. But what we see is that the people who really are the most resilient, the ones that kind of strengthen that emotional muscle, if you will, what they're able to kind of recognize is that adversity, that difficulty in the moment, that pushing out of that comfort zone, that actually is what's necessary in terms of being able to experience some type of growth. And so many of us, and many of you, I mean, I'm sitting here quite inspired by just listening to all of your stories of, I'm sitting here listening to these wonderful individuals in this panel, and I'm thinking, these people are so capable and in so many ways. And my bet is, and I'd love to hear from some of you, of how your experience with your children having this disease and the certain adversity that it has created for you, but how it also has shaped you and made you to be people that perhaps you never realized that you could be, and develop into people that you could never be, and to look back and see what you handle and what you can take on. And that is the essence of kind of trying to promote pushing out of that comfort zone. Is it's okay to not feel good in this moment. And that struggle, okay, is actually indicative of then growth that is occurring. The problem is that so many people, when they experience that struggle, so that tension, that stress, that anxiety, if you will, when we're trying to, engage in activities and pushing ourselves to that discomfort, so many people will falsely immediately kind of conclude that, well, because I don't feel good right now and I don't like this, that means this is bad. It's not good. And then people will retreat oftentimes as a result. And being able to kind of turn that perception around, I heard several of you talk about attitude, and certainly there is an attitudinal approach to this. The role modeling is absolutely critical as parents, while also I believe the acceptance of simply knowing that just because maybe my child or maybe me is just not feeling it today or this week or right now, we take that into consideration of what it is, which is simply a moment in time where we know this is hard, but it doesn't mean that we're sliding backwards. What it means is it's an opportunity for us to learn, grow. Okay, what can we do differently? Maybe I can tweak this. Maybe I can approach this a bit differently next time. So then when we push, maybe we'll have a little bit more in our reserves. So that attitudinal approach is absolutely critical. But, children are children, and teenagers are teenagers, young adults are young adults. And we know that they're certainly going to have their moments that is quite developmentally appropriate, where they're going to push back. And on some levels, we accept it as being okay. But as long as we continue down that path but we can do it. The last thing I'll say is that I really love this type of quote of, the past doesn't define me as much as it trains me. And I think that in so many ways, that's what we really see in these remarkable individuals, many of you, and probably how you kind of approach life, is that I'm not defined so much by my past, but it really kind of trains me to be able to take on more in the future. And that is a very, very healthy, resilient way of approaching any type of adversity.
Those are all really, really important points. I think one of the hardest things for parents is to push their kids when they're uncomfortable and to get them to continue to move forward in that discomfort, right? Natalie, how do you help parents kind of deal with that?
That's a really good question. I think there's no one size fits all. And I think Pat says it best: when you've met one kid with Duchenne, you've met one kid with Duchenne. And I think really it's, who your kid as an individual, who you are as a family unit, what your values are, and what's motivating the desire to push past that barrier. And, for my older guys, like sometimes it's like they don't want, like they recognize that this is hard on their family and they want to get better at having other people like put their socks on. And they want to get really good at being okay with not needing their socks changed for 2 hours straight. And so we work on that one thing, and we set up our schedule in a way that optimizes our opportunity to be successful. And we just work on that one thing until we're tolerating that a little longer, or we're going a little bit longer, and we just keep upping the ante. And then we work on the next thing. And I think what's hard is sometimes it's getting the boys to a point that they're okay with and being motivated to tolerate that distress. Because what we're asking them to do is harder than it is for me, right? And it's harder than it is for most of us on this panel, because we are making dystrophin, and we have dystrophin in our brain, and things are going really great. And when you don't have that, it makes tolerating small things really hard, and it makes tolerating things that feel different than what you're used to very difficult. And so I think figuring out what's motivating your desire to do that, I think is really important, because that is what the boys, when they have that, they can tolerate a lot more and are able to push themselves in ways that they didn't think they were able to before.
Yeah, I think getting people to push forward and do things they didn't think they were able to before is incredibly important for all of us. And I know that the lack of dystrophin in the brain can cause issues with learning and behavior. And sometimes when you push these guys a little too hard, it causes some behavior issues. James, I know that I wondered what your thoughts were on how to sort of manage those adverse behaviors that may come from pushing and trying to instill independence.
How much time do we have?
Not that much time, James.
Yeah, and I was being sarcastic. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I think that I don't know if I have an easy answer for you, because it's always going to depend on the immediate context of what's happening and what it is we're asking them to do and how difficult it is and what kind of day they've had and how their sleep was and if they've eaten or not. I mean, there's so many factors, and it's hard to kind of always know what's at play in any given moment. You know, I think that I think that Natalie made a good point, though, that kind of breaking it down into small steps is really important, and it makes it feel more manageable. And oftentimes the behavioral stuff is because of anxiety, like they're stressed, they're frustrated, it feels too uncomfortable. I feel like one of the biggest challenges to overcome, and I think that this is maybe kind of a root of some of these other things that we see, but there's really oftentimes, and we're all like this, but I think even more so with some people who have Duchenne, there's a tendency to very much make decisions based on how they feel right now, not necessarily kind of like how they're going to feel in the future, or, you know, despite kind of how logical it might seem of me needing to do this, they very much make decisions based on right now. And so, earlier, I think as a parent, the way that even though I'm as a psychologist, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but it would be very stressful for me when Joel would become resistant or he would have a meltdown or something because we were asking him to do something that was out of his comfort zone. And I think that caused me to become, I think, sometimes too critical or to put too much pressure on him or to become really frustrated myself and start arguing. And it never convinced him, like it never made it better. It always made it worse. And I still have yet to learn my lesson in that regard, but I'm getting better. Right, Rachel? But, you know, I think that trying to de-escalate those situations and be as calm as you can and be positive and encouraging and supportive. And kind of like Natalie was saying, okay, maybe the whole big thing we're trying to do seems like too much, but maybe we can do just this little bit, or we can do it for just a little while, or, you know, kind of breaking it down into kind of bite-sized pieces can sometimes help with kind of the reaction that you're getting in the moment. It doesn't always work, but you tend to catch more flies with honey. And I think it's harder for us because we see how important it is for them to be independent. And if it feels like they're resisting that, it can be really stressful for us as parents. And it's hard to stay calm. And so I think the other kind of key factor is staying calm as parents really, really goes a long way as well.
Yeah, that's hard to do when there's a stressful situation, right? Gretchen, is there one thing that you wish you'd done earlier after your son's diagnosis that would have maybe helped increase his confidence and motivate his independence?
Well, I can't remember if it was Brandon or James who said, when you've met one kid with Duchenne, you've met one kid with Duchenne. And when Nick was diagnosed, I remember I had a student who had SMA in my class, and Nick was 2. And so I was, crying every time anybody asked me how my summer was, because that was what happened that summer. My kid had gotten diagnosed, and I had the senior in my class, and he said, cool, when he's 6, I'll see him at summer camp. And I was like, okay. And then everybody would say, when he's 6, he can go to summer camp, best week of the year, And so when Nick was 6, I'm like, you're going to summer camp. And he was a little nervous about it, whatever, but he went. And then he said he didn't want to go back. And I made him go for 3 years in a row because it's the best week of your year. And you need to go to summer camp to be with these boys. It's going to be wonderful because you need to go. Everybody loves it. And I think if I knew Nick now and how he is at 21, he didn't want to go to summer camp, and that was okay. And, he could hang out and chill and talk with people, and he's made some friends. But, that experience of being away from home for a week with strangers and being forced into a group, that's not him. And I think understanding that, I often say there's a fine line between helicopter parenting and neglect when you have a son with special needs, and because you push them, but they could be in danger sometimes. And I think I have listened to him more. He didn't have a lot of struggles with like refusing to do like tasks at home, like James cited. Not too much of that, but I think I'd listened to him earlier because he's really spunky and he has that, that tenacity. And I think I'd have listened to it and recognized it quite a bit earlier.
Betty, with 3 boys with Duchenne, you're doing a lot of listening.
Yeah, I am doing a lot of listening. I think, I was thinking about things that we would have done differently to foster independence. And we've had help in the house from the get-go because there's 6 of them and 3 of them, and we were completely outnumbered. But in the beginning, we just had help come in like they were babysitters, so I could take the oldest to do something, or so I could take one child to one appointment. And I wish that I would have used those babysitters more as like, not necessarily nursing staff, but staff along those lines that could have helped more with the stretching and the cough assist, and even in the bathroom. This last year, my 11-year-old is starting to go off his feet, and that's our first major transition. And he's needed more help in the bathroom. And although we'd had a new respite provider in the house that was doing cough assist and was doing stretching, Rowan had never had anybody else help him in the bathroom. And I wish, and I left one day to go just have a cup of coffee at a local coffee shop, and he called me from the bathroom. He used the Alexa and called me and was waiting for me to come home before he would not let the respite provider in to help. So I think if that's one thing I would have done sooner, would to get them more used to accepting that kind of help.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from other people.
That makes sense.
I'm sorry. I'd love to hear from other parents as well about getting outside help and the professionals as well. So, sorry. Of course, I got a call at this very moment. It's really hard for boys to accept outside help from outside providers, and I think it's many times easier I hear from moms, it's easier if I just do it, or it's easier not to fight with them. So I'd love to hear how other people have engaged outside providers and outside help. James, maybe you could start with that.
Well, we've actually kind of been fortunate in the sense that we've had grandparents who have moved here to be with us specifically, or at least in large part, to help out with care and support and that sort of thing. And I remember our first few years before that was the case, when we were really kind of on our own here in Houston, and it was really tough. I think when grandparents started mentioning, "Hey, do you want us to move there?" At first we were kind of like, there's the whole kind of, family and setting boundaries and, having some limits with family connections. But, then we realized, man, this is going to be something that's going to be kind of a marathon, and we're really going to need some help. And so we really encouraged that and arranged for Rachel's parents to move to Houston, and then my parents to move to Houston. And it's been a huge help. I think also too, we've been blessed at times too with friends who've volunteered to help out, at least kind of with small things here and there. Transportation, kind of going back to what Rachel said as far as being plugged into the Duchenne community, being plugged into the local Duchenne community. Other families and other parents of boys who have Duchenne have also been helpful as well, as far as giving rides and things like that. So we could always use more. I think we found that you can't be shy about asking, and, some people might get kind of weird about that, but so what? Because if you don't ask, you're not going to get it necessarily. So, sometimes you have to be a little bit aggressive about that. And even if it's a little bit awkward, you have to kind of, throw it out there.
Thanks, Rachel. I know that sometimes it's hard to push your kids and to get other outside people when there's a little bit of guilt involved with this diagnosis around being carriers and trying to care for people in your household and care for yourself. So how do you encourage moms to manage the guilt around this diagnosis and that they sometimes have?
Yeah, I think that's hard because it plays into the caregiving too, where you think, well, there's some subconscious level of this where you think I did this to them, so I have to take care of them, and just that dynamic with your spouse, with your family, you feel like, oh gosh, how did I bring this into our family? Which of course you did. It's not your fault. You have to move past that. I think I think Duchenne moms in general and dads need to give themselves forgiveness and grace about things. Before Joel was diagnosed, we would fight every day because he would not want to walk out to the parking lot from the daycare where I worked. And I had such guilt about that forever that I didn't pick him up. I was trying to build independence. I'm like, you're 3, you can walk. I don't need to carry you. But I say all the time to my other Duchenne moms, I say, we do the best we can with the information we had at that time. And we make the best decisions that we had at that moment. And that's try to really be my mantra so that I don't always live in the past of, I should have done this, I should have done that. And just to give myself grace to say, I did the best with what, it was perfectly normal for me to expect a typically developing 3-year-old to walk to the parking lot. And so I think that just you've got to just give yourself grace in it and accept that you are doing the best that you can, and it's not always going to be perfect.
If I could chime in real quick here, Rachel, you talked about the shoulds. So I just want to throw this out there to all the parents. One little line you can remind yourselves is you have to stop shoulding on yourself all the time. So I'll just leave it at that.
I really like that. That's really good.
That's really pretty brilliant.
I didn't invent it, so I heard it from someone else. So I can't take that.
So Gretchen, I think it's really hard to give yourself grace sometimes, right? How do you do that?
There's always some other thing that comes along. I'm pretty honest with Nick, so I apologize when I really screw up, I think when Nick was about a sophomore in high school or freshman or sophomore, he really didn't talk about college. We didn't really know what would happen, when he finished. And then when he decided that he wanted to go to college, and then, we talked about him actually living on campus and doing those things. I wish that I had been more proactive in having him have strangers as caregivers, because when he went to Whitewater, which is a college, it's a half hour away, and he lived in the dorms and we had an agency that came and, so strangers, like new people came and helped him out. And so I felt some guilt there that I hadn't really prepped him for that. And I was sort of like, throwing him to the wolves with this agency. And, he did really well. He did excellently with that. And now he is living with his best friend, who has been his best friend since he was 3. And he is his primary caregiver. And he's got another roommate that comes back, who's a former roommate who comes back and also works for him. And so I think things work out, things tend to be okay. And maybe I'm a little too lenient on myself, but I think that, we, I don't know, I screw up, and I'm the first to admit it. My mom's living with me now, and she'll tell me when she says I'm doing something wrong. So, I mean, I get that all the time. But I think you only get one, and you can't spend too much time dwelling on the shouldas and problems that you had. I remember years ago at a conference, there was a mom's group that sat around, and people felt angry and bad about which deletion and which exon and which thing their son had because of how it affected future trials. And, like, we have no control over any of that. And there's so much that we just have to just give up. And we got the whole COVID now that that's just another wrench that's in everything. So just, do the best you can with what you have, and keep a smile on your face, and things go pretty well.
Yeah, the whole COVID thing puts a whole new element of fear into everything, right? Betty, any thoughts?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part of the
I
question.
said the whole COVID situation kind of increases everyone's fear around a whole lot of things. So how do you deal with the increased fear of the COVID and increased in the fear around Duchenne? And that's a lot of fear. So trying to find ways to cope with all that fear and find silver linings. How do you sort of manage that?
Well, I mean, COVID is still so new, and we're still learning right along with everybody, exactly how to handle that with Duchenne and with our boys, and, going back to school. But I think in general, with things with Duchenne that have been difficult, our mantra has sort of been just to look for the joys, find the joy in the journey. I always tell kids, and most of you have probably heard me say it before, but like a mathematical equation, if we just look for all the little joys every day and we add them up, that sum is then whatever was bad that day. And so that's been, we've done that with COVID, we've done that, with Duchenne, we've done that with our kids that don't have Duchenne, that have had their own trials. And we just look for the joy. And it's really a mindset. I think you have to choose that that's what you're going to do on a daily basis, not just when everything is going well, but especially when things aren't going well, to be able to still say, but look, this good thing right here just happened. And we've done that a lot during COVID. Well, just an example, like Rowan, 11 years old, fell and broke his leg May 15th. He was just about ready to stop walking anyways. And it's our first broken anything, Duchenne child or unaffected child. And it totally freaked us out. And I was pretty sure that he would probably never walk again. But that happened, and we decided we're just going to put a pool in. We weren't doing physical therapy anywhere. We weren't, it's just been a difficult time. So we were going to put a pool in. And that boy got in that pool every single day. And when he got his boot off last week, the little booger walked. And that's huge. So that was better than breaking his leg. This morning, this is the first time since he got out of the boot that he got himself out of bed. And I was having coffee on the couch, and he just opened the door and walked out. And I'm like, what are you doing? And that was happy. And I almost cried. And I'm like, so that none of that would have happened, I don't think, without COVID, because he wouldn't have been in the water every single day, bearing weight every single day. And we wouldn't have put a pool in without COVID, because I would have said, nope, we got other things to do. But so we found the joy.
Isn't that funny how things all sort of follow the path they're supposed to follow, right? Rachel, any thoughts to add?
Well, I think for me, what's been helpful in COVID is really to rely on other Duchenne parents, because again, it's a situation where, no one quite understands what you're going through except for them when your anxieties and fears come up. And it's hard, everybody has a different reason why you should go to school or why you should wear a mask or not wear a mask and all these things. But for me, I've found a lot of comfort in just calling my Duchenne friends and just saying, how do you feel right now? And just kind of taking your temperature. I have one Duchenne mom. I think she's the only other pastor mom Duchenne that I found. And we had both agreed. We said, let's just agree that we can text each other and call each other when we're getting stressed. because we share some of the same struggles and things like that. And so I think it's really important, when Joel was first diagnosed, I wasn't integrated into the Duchenne community at all, and I missed out. And so if you're not connected to other Duchenne families, especially during this time, I just encourage you to kind of find your tribe of people that you can connect with.
I think that's really good advice.
And I just want to reinforce that. Thanks, Jen. 1 second. I just want to that social support piece, because what we know is that the single greatest mitigating factor of people with experiencing profound anxiety, depression, burnout, compassion fatigue, these things, is the perception of social support. What's amazing is that you don't even actually have to have the social support. It's more like the perception of it that people have. And especially when that social support, and I'd love to kind of hear from some of the parents here as you're speaking to, when that social support is coming from individuals that has some additional insight and understanding of what it's like for you. And the other piece of that is then getting kind of active in your coping. And so again, I want to call out and give praise to the parents here on this panel, but then everyone else that's active and part of this conference here, is that is a form of being actively engaged, getting actively involved. And we just know that when people do that, it's versus this kind of passive piece where you're just kind of trying to live with it and trying to cope with it, but you're now actively getting involved, getting engaged, connecting with other individuals, learning from them, listening, sharing, crying, laughing together. It's these types of things that's done around the social support network of people that you feel like can truly understand what it's like to kind of be in your boat. Mm-hmm. That's what we see consistently as being truly the most therapeutic thing that people can do from themselves consistently over time.
James, did you have
thought? I think I was going to kind of comment on what Betty said, but also what Dr. Kozar had said, kind of adding to that in the sense that, I don't know, my perspective has always been that bitter parents cause bitter kids. And it is really important to try to, make the best of the situation that you can. And coronavirus is no different than any other situation. However, if you're plugged into community, when you do need to go on a therapeutic rant, you're going to have receptive ears to whatever it is you're ranting about. Because if you go on that same rant with somebody who's not in the Duchenne community, you just may sound crazy, which isn't always bad either. But people get it. But I think that in the midst of the coronavirus, there's a lot of uncertainty, and my middle name is kind of cynicism. And so I think you really do have to be conscious and proactive and purposeful about looking for positive things and not getting too caught up in kind of focusing on the negative. And, there's a young man with a different neuromuscular disorder called Maddie Stepanek. And I can't remember if he had SMA or maybe Kathy. Anyway, but he told his mom, he said, "Don't lie down in the ashes of my life." And I think there's something to that. Like, there's always something negative we can focus on, but and it's okay to acknowledge difficult situations, but we can't get caught up in that, whether it's coronavirus or whether it's a decline in health or whether, it's you've got crazy family or whatever it is. I think as much as you can kind of balance the negative with the good, it really does help you get through it. And I think too, trying to have something to look forward to, that can also kind of help in those difficult situations. I found that that's helpful. If I always have kind of something to look forward to, it helps me kind of deal with those days when I am feeling a bit down or stressed or discouraged about things. Helps you kind of rebound. So.
Yes, and speaking of having something to look forward to, I think it's really important for the guys to have things to look forward to, and so many of them so many times aren't given the opportunity to think about future plans and future goals. So Natalie, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about when to get guys involved in their own care and when to start to think about future plans and along those lines of transition.
Yeah, I agree with Betty and Gretchen and all the other parents about starting early. And I think the tricky part about this is right as they're getting independent, they start to be dependent, right? And so it's this weird mind place that you find yourself in as a parent. And then you want to start to undo that, right, as they get more dependent on you and on other people. And so I do think having that start early is incredibly important. And we're talking like having even maybe like dads put socks on, right? Like the kids will say like, my mom is the only one that can do X, Y, Z, and this person does this. And it's like, well, maybe we swap those on like odd days, right? Like it's just a schedule and it is what it is. Like we're not going to talk about it. That's the plan. And I think we start talking about it early, and it's all under this umbrella of like, this is what's best for you. And being a parent isn't always, like, I'm sorry that you hate this bud, but like, this is what's best for you. And you'll thank me for it in 10 years. And I know that you don't want so-and-so to lift gun. I know you don't like them doing your bath, and I know they don't put your shirt on right. And I know that, you have feelings about that, and we're going to sit with that for 2 hours. And then if you still feel that way, we can make some adjustments, right? But we got to learn to tolerate other people. And we just, you set up a schedule, and you just work the schedule, and you work it because that's a skill they have to learn. And we all have our own crosses to bear, and that's part of it for them is getting comfortable tolerating distress around those things. And we don't want to be monsters, right? Like they have days where you're just like, oh yeah, you're not doing it today. You didn't sleep well, maybe you're sick, we have upcoming visits, let's not rock this boat, but then that's not the rule. The rule is we normally do this on these days because these boys are rule governed. So, use that to your advantage, right? Like it's like when they use it to their advantage, you're like, no, you just said we were only doing it this one time, and now we already did it that one time, and I don't want to do it. And so you can, you're like, buddy, like this is the rule, we're just doing it. It goes both ways. And so I think the things that make these boys amazing are strengths, and the world is not designed for them. And that doesn't mean those aren't strengths. And sometimes it's important to make those strengths highlighted and to always pull those in as like, I know though, but like you do these other things and you're brave. So I know you can tolerate this, right? And I'm going to like walk away for a bit, and I know you're going to be okay, even though you don't think you're going to be okay, because I know you're going to be okay. Right. And we do that all the time with our kids, whether they have Duchenne or not. It just looks different for these boys. And so sometimes it's thinking, how did I do this with my other kids, or how have I seen my friends do this, and modifying it and be okay with that. Like comparing yourself to other people is going to drive you crazy. It drives all of us crazy, but it's going to drive you really crazy here because all the boys are different. You're different. Your family system is different. And what works for one family may not work for you. And that's not a failure, right? Like that's just differences in people and differences in kids and differences in how things work out. And so, be careful with that at times, right? Having a community of lots of different parents is important because some things that work for even the people on this panel may not work for the others. Right. And it's you're either winning or learning. And I tell that if you've seen me in clinic, I say that to you all the time. We're never failing. We're only failing if we're not learning. And so for these boys in these situations, there are a lot of winning and a lot of learning. And they give us lots of opportunities to learn. And their wins are amazing. And when they win, like we build on that. And they do a lot of things to help us in that direction. And so sometimes I think it's how do we make fun happen, even though this is hard. And kids are great because they are good at having fun. So pull that in and use their advantages to your advantage. The things that sometimes drive you crazy, right, can be strengths for them with getting some of these independent rules going.
Thanks, Natalie. James, we're getting short on time.
Okay, I'll be fast. I was just going to say, I think it makes a difference just in the words you use during everyday conversations and the way that you phrase things. Saying things like when you move out, when you get a job, when you go to college, when you're a dad, when you have a family, not all those things may necessarily come true, but I always tell people, if you don't use those words, I guarantee you they won't come true. But that kind of normalizes that stuff, and that starts them thinking that they can accomplish those things. But we have to kind of, refer to them in little ways. They can't, sometimes you have to have kind of big formal conversations, but a lot of it, I think, is communicated just kind of in the day-to-day stuff here and there, kind of almost in an offhand way sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think what the words that we all use are incredibly important, and in all situations. Brandon, as a last thought, what are some ways that you offer to people outside the Duchenne community to help parents who are living with children with Duchenne and people who are living with Duchenne? How can people outside of your immediate family offer support?
It kind of goes back to a little bit of what I said earlier around just, the experience and the perception of social support. At the very least, if there's outside family members that, are thinking about what can I do, I think the same, there's a similarity in terms of they have to be careful to give themselves some grace also, that, focus on what you can control and what you cannot. But simply, letting, those parents know that I'm here and I'm thinking about you. And even if it's a simple little text message, hey, you're on my mind right now. I'm wishing you just a happy, blessed day, or something like that. These little things just matter. It just makes us realize that, other people are out there thinking about me and supporting us and supporting my child. The last thing I just want to say in terms of a couple kind of resiliency happiness tricks, because I just want to reinforce some of the things that have been said here. So Dr. Martin Seligman, he was kind of like the father of the kind of the positive psychology movement. He has this wonderful exercise that's been empirically shown to actually improve happiness and joy in people's lives and promote resiliency. And a lot of the parents have kind of talked about it in their own ways of how they try to find the silver linings and focus on the positives and add them up. And it's called the What Went Well exercise. And this is a really fun thing to do. It's a nice thing to do, be able to do with your family, maybe sitting around, whether it's the dinner table or just hanging out with each other, where periodically, once a day would be really cool, although I don't think that's realistic for most of us, where we all just kind of go around as a family and we all share at least one thing that went well today. What went well today? And then here's the second part that's the most important. And why do you think it went well, Billy? Or why do you think it went well, John? What it does is it helps teach kids that who they are, their values, their intentions, their efforts contributes to things going well within their lives. And it just helps to kind of bridge those connections and start helping them start to see. And what we've seen is that when people start to do that, it literally starts changing the brain patterns of how they kind of focus and how they process the environment around them. Over time, people will literally just start paying attention to and noticing the silver linings just a little bit easier. But our human brain is not designed to be able to see the silver linings automatically. Our human brains are designed to focus on threats and possibilities and things that could go wrong first. Okay, it's part of our just survival mechanisms. And so that one well exercise is excellent. And then the other thing, I think James, you brought this up also, always have something to look forward to, even if it's the smallest, littlest thing. And the key is try not to have that thing that you're looking forward to being something big and grandiose. It's the small, simple things that are oftentimes free. I'm just looking forward to being
travel. Mine was travel, by the way. So
you
need a more broad repertoire. But anyway,
yeah. So shake it up a little bit. I'm looking forward to pizza. Or my reality TV show tonight. Something like that. And then, but think about that thing that you're looking forward to in very detailed terms. Don't just kind of say it, but try to kind of actually live it in the moment. Especially if you're having a hard time, you're struggling, and you're having a moment. We're all going to have a moment. All people have moments. Life is stressful, nonetheless. With being parents of a child with special needs. So we give ourselves that grace, but then when we do these other things, it just helps us bounce back a little bit easier.
Thanks, Brandon. Those are all, I just think that's so important. And Betty, I know that you have all these special moments that are happening in your life, and you have to have things to look forward to with all of your kids. So I would imagine that gets a little tough sometimes.
Well, no, we just have a lot to look forward to. Everybody has their own special thing, and we look forward to it. Right now, we are going through getting our house accessible. And so when it's all the way done, we hope COVID's over, and we're looking forward, we're going to have a full access party. So everybody can see how fully accessible our house is. So that's what we're looking forward to, a big accessible party.
That sounds amazing. Well, I've been looking forward to this group all week, so I think this has been really fun. Pat, do you have any final thoughts or any thoughts that you'd like to share?
So first of all, I love this. Thank you all for joining this panel. It's been really wonderful. I think one of the most interesting things is having two boys with Duchenne and going through that journey with them and with my two daughters who are healthy. A friend of mine called and said, "Find your us." And because I expected my family would all come to help, but I didn't even ask them or tell them what to do to help. So then I decided that they weren't very helpful at all, which was a real disconnect on my part, I think. So I think that it comes down to find your us. Tell people what you need, who you need, how they could help you. And even that text message to say, I'm just here. And if you want to fall down in my arms. And I think that those kinds of things, finding that network and finding time for yourself. I used to go take my kids to school and then go to the track, and I would walk, and I'd walk and cry and scream and yell, and then talk to everybody that wasn't on the track about what they should be doing. And I think that gave me time to clear my head and find my us. So thank you. This has been a wonderful panel. And I so appreciate all the things all of you do for me and for this community, because it helps and it makes us all more resilient.
Thank you.
I think if we all work on strengthening our own emotional muscles and the emotional muscles of the people behind us or around us, and I love stop shooting on yourself. That was a good one. And look for the joys in every day and find things to be grateful for every day. I think easy, not so easy ways to move forward and help the people around us move forward. I can't thank you guys enough. This has been a wonderful panel, and we appreciate all of your thoughts and all of your suggestions. And thank you very much.